Lillahi ta'ala, correct your intentions. I ask Allah to make this easy for me and for you. Praise and thanks are due to Allah who enabled us to do the good deeds and gave us the privilege of going over tonight a very prestigious and classical work, which is Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar by Imam Abu Hanifa. It's a metin in the Aqidah, yani, it's a text, a summarized text in Aqidah. And we've taken a number of texts in the Aqidah and even bigger, more detailed books. And what this text contains is familiar. Alhamdulillah, for those of you who've been studying with us for some time, this is going to be familiar, alhamdulillah. Now, I just want to, like we've done before, try to stick to the text and not going to go into some elaborate explanations of things. Only, inshallah, if there's something that needs details, we'll go into it. But there are some very nice things. There's something very nice about Abu Hanifa's style. May Allah have mercy upon him. And he has some things in here that, inshallah, we'll point out if Allah enables us. And really, to be honest with you, subhanAllah, I have in my heart a hayba. Hayba is like awe, A-W-E. It's like a type of fear. Not a fear of like making a mistake or something like that, but it's like a respect. So it's like, I think you get the picture. So, I ask Allah Ta'ala to enable me to do this text justice and to benefit His believing slaves. Ameen. And so the author says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قال الإمام أبو حنيفة رضي الله عنه, said Imam Abu Hanifa, may Allah accept from him, أصل التوحيد وما يصح الاعتقاد عليه يجب أن يقول. He said, the base of monotheism and that by which the conviction is valid. The base of monotheism and that by which the conviction is valid is that it is obligatory to say what Abu Hanifa is going to tell us here. Now, subhanAllah, as I was reviewing, I remembered something that I heard several times. Sheikh Samir said that it's the habit of the later scholars to say that it's obligatory, it's a personal obligation to know 13 attributes of Allah. But it doesn't mean that the early ones didn't say that. They did sometimes, like Abu Hanifa in Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar. So, and I remember once, so I looked in Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar a long time ago. I didn't find any statement in there that said it's a personal obligation to learn 13 attributes. So I asked Sheikh Samir, I said, I didn't find it. He said, you missed it. So I didn't know what he was talking about. So as I was reviewing, then I had an idea. So let's find these 13 attributes, inshallah ta'ala, and also right here, Abu Hanifa mentioned the obligation. And yaqul, that one says. And now, what he's saying here that it's obligatory on one to say, he means it's obligatory for one to have as a belief in his heart. Because it's not actually obligatory to literally verbally say what Abu Hanifa is going to present here. Like this sentence of Abu Hanifa, for example, is not obligatory on someone to say. So he says yaqul here to say, and he means to believe, and that's valid. To say what? Amantu billah. I believe in Allah. Wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulih. And in his angels, and his books, and his messengers. Wal ba'thi ba'da al-maut. And resurrection after death. Wal qadari khayrihi wa sharrihi min Allah ta'ala. And destiny, it's good and it's evil from God. Exalted is He. وَالْحِسَابِ وَالْمِيزَانِ وَالْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ. And the reckoning and the scale, the balance, and the garden and the fire. وَذَلِكَ حَقٌّ كُلُّهُ. And all of that is true. First thing here, let's look at how Imam Abu Hanifa started his Aqidah. And also think about how some other Aqidah books that you know about, how do they start? So, for example, Tahawi, who took his knowledge from Abu Hanifa's route, and he was actually documenting Abu Hanifa's way. His book is like a compilation and an update of Abu Hanifa's way, of Tahawi. He started by talking about the Tawheed and the attributes of Allah in particular. And that's how a lot of the books start, talking about the attributes of Allah Ta'ala. You remember An-Nasafi, he started talking about knowledge. Here, Imam Abu Hanifa, he started by mentioning the most important matters of faith that came in the Quran and in the Hadith, such as the Hadith of Jibreel. Those 6 most important matters of faith. He said it's obligatory to say, meaning to believe, Amantu billah, I believe in Allah. Now, so we don't have to stop there to explain, because he's going to elaborate about the attributes of Allah. Wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi wal ba'thi, etc. And I believe in his angels and his books and his messengers and resurrection, etc. to what's here. And usually in the books that we saw. These things are mentioned later, after the author would mention some things about the creed. Then they would come and say, for example, and resurrection is true, and gathering is true, and the book of deeds is true, and the questioning is true. You've seen it several times. So here Abu Hanifa has that first thing, is that it's obligatory to say, meaning to believe, I believe in Allah. Yani to say, I believe in Allah. Yani it's obligatory to believe in Allah and his angels and his books and his messengers and the resurrection after death and destiny, it's good and it's evil from God. Exalted is He. And the reckoning and the scale and the garden and the fire. And then what did Abu Hanifa say right here? وَذَلِكَ حَقٌّ كُلُّهُ. And that is true, all of it. That statement right there is condensed version of what the scholars say, because they keep repeating that. Don't they say, for example, وَالْبَعْثُ حَقٌّ وَالْحِسَابُ حَقٌّ وَالْمِيزَانُ حَقٌّ وَالْجَنَّةُ حَقٌّ وَالنَّارُ حَقٌّ. So Abu Hanifa, he mentioned all of those, and then he said, وَذَلِكَ حَقٌّ كُلُّهُ. All of that is haqq. Now, all these things, they have explanation, as you know. What is resurrection? How do we explain it? And destiny, and the angels, and the books, and the messengers. So that's, if you wanted to stop word by word and start explaining everything, that's a lot to talk about. But actually, I have a goal today, and I don't want to stop here and talk about these things in detail. And for Abu Hanifa to start his metin like this is a strong way, because he started by presenting what came in the hadith of Jibreel and also is in the Quran. And then he started talking about the attributes of Allah. So let's see if we find the 13 attributes. He says, Wallahu ta'ala wahidun la min tariqi al-adad. And God, exalted is He, is one, not by way of numbers, or or not by way of counting. وَلَكِنْ مِنْ طَرِيقِ أَنَّهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. Rather, by way of that He has no partner. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He did not give birth, nor was He born. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And there was never a match for Him. So those words are clear. Allah Ta'ala is Wahid, one, not by way of numbers, or not by way of number. That's singular, Adad. Not by way of number, rather by way that He has no partner. So that's the attribute of oneness there, Al-Wahdaniyah. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He did not give birth, nor was He born. That's still oneness. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Then here, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, that does have the meaning of oneness. That means, and He never had a match. There was never a match for Him. That does have the meaning of oneness. So right here, he mentioned the attribute of oneness with several statements. He said that is one reference to oneness. Yes. Yani all of this here refers to the attribute of oneness. Several statements here. Wallahu ta'ala wahid. So right there. لا من طريق العدد ولكن من طريق أنه لا شريك له. And then يعني he elaborated, said Allah has one, not by way of number, rather by the way that He has no partner. Okay. لم يلد ولم يولد, he produced the words from the ayah of the Quran. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد, he produced words from Surah Al-Ikhlas. He incorporated them into his metin. But also, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. This ayah also proves his dissimilarity. Dissimilarity, يعني المخالفة للحوادث, that he's not like the creations. Yeah. And Abu Hanifa goes from there, from this sentence here, into that point. لا يشبه شيئا من الأشياء. He does not resemble anything amongst the things, min khalqihi, of His creation. He does not resemble anything amongst the things of His creation. وَلَا يُشْبِهُهُ شَيْءٌ مِّنْ خَلْقِهِ. And nothing of His creation resembles Him. So that's the attribute of al-mukhalafatu lil hawadith, dissimilarity. He said it though with more than one sentence, with more than one statement. لا يشبه شيئا من الأشياء. Right there, that gives the meaning. He doesn't resemble anything amongst the things, min khalqihi, of His creation. And then he said more, وَلَا يُشْبِهُهُ شَيْءٌ مِّنْ خَلْقِهِ. And nothing of His creation resembles Him. So that's two attributes. لم يزل ولا يزال بأسمائه وصفاته الذاتية والفعلية. He never ceased to be and shall not cease to be with his names and his attributes, the self attributes and the action or doing attributes. He never ceased to be and shall not cease to be with his names and attribute, and with his self and doing names and attributes. He never ceased to be, nor shall he cease to be with his self and doing names and attributes. Yani his names that refer to his self and doings, and his attributes that refer to his self and doings. So that's two more attributes right there. Lam yazal, he never ceased to be. That means he's eternal. Al-azaliyah, wala yazal, and he's everlasting. He shall never cease to be. So that's four attributes there. Now, in the midst of talking about these attributes, he mentions his names and his attributes. Yani, his names and his attributes. He says that Allah has names and he says that Allah has attributes. So he started talking about the attributes of Allah. Allah is one. Allah doesn't resemble anything. Allah never ceased to be, and he shall not cease to be. And Allah has names, and Allah has attributes. Now, as for his names, you know, Allah Ta'ala has names from the Quran that are in the Quran, and names that are in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and names that are confirmed by the consensus. And some scholars said doesn't go further than that. And that's the strong saying. And the same for his attributes. He has attributes that are mentioned in the Quran, and attributes mentioned in the Sunnah, and attributes confirmed by consensus, and it doesn't go beyond that. And so these names refer to what? These names refer to his self, like the name Allah, and they refer to his self attributes. His self attributes, his self. So his name, he has names, and his names refer to his self, like Allah, and his names refer to his self attributes, the attributes of his self, like Al-Qadir or Al-Qadir, powerful, Al-Alim, knowledgeable, because Qudra is the attribute of the self, as you know. Ilm, knowledge, is an attribute of the self, and others like Al-Hayy, the living one, refers to his attribute called Al-Haya, life. That's an attribute of his self. So his names refer to his self, and they refer to his attributes of his self, and his names refer also to his doings. Like Allah is Al-Muhyi, life creator, and Al-Mumit, death creator. Now, Abu Hanifa is saying, Allah is eternal and everlasting. Okay, he said, Lam yazal wa la yazal. And he said here, Bi asma'ihi wa sifatihi. Now, to say he's eternal and everlasting with his attributes, that's, I think, is clear for you if you've been studying with us for some time. Because his attributes are eternal and everlasting. But Abu Hanifa is saying his names and his attributes, eternal and everlasting with his names and attributes. The meaning of the statement that his names are eternal. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that the words we say, like Al-Khaliq or Allah, that these are eternal. No. Rather, it means that what those names refer to is eternal. and his attributes are eternal. Like, for example, knowledge. So when we say the word knowledge doesn't mean the word knowledge is eternal. It's not. He has an attribute. So his attribute is eternal. The attribute itself. And we say Allah, that word is not eternal, but he has a name. You're not going to say he didn't have a name in eternity. That's what the Mu'tazila said. Because the Mu'tazila are closet atheists. So they said Allah didn't have any name in eternity. But they didn't stop there either. They said he didn't have an attribute in eternity. He didn't have an attribute in eternity, and he didn't have a name in eternity. So they're basically saying he didn't exist. They went as far as to say, since he didn't have an attribute, he didn't have speech. And so he didn't have speech, so he couldn't have even given himself a name. He didn't even have an eternal speech so that he could give himself a name. So that's blasphemy. So we counted here so far 4 attributes, and add to that that he mentioned for us that Allah has names. And add to that that he mentioned that Allah has attributes. Yani he produced the word sifat. He's saying he has names and he has attributes. And add to that that he told us that he has attributes of the self and he has attributes of doings. And he has names that refer to his self and names that refer to his doings. He has names that refer to his attributes of the self. And he has names that refer to his doings. And he has names that refer to himself. Okay, it's clear so far? Any question? So yeah, here's Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar. You're familiar. But now we're going to see Abu Hanifa's approach, his style, what information did he prioritize? How did he summarize? How did he repeat? So then he went on to say, Rahimahullah, Amma dhatiyah, as for the self attributes, فالحياة والقدرة والعلم والكلام والسمع والبصر والإرادة. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. So there's still 2 more. So these 7, these are the 7 that are what? Do you know? Let me call some names out here. Abd al-Qawi. Do you know what you call these 7 attributes? You do know. Do you remember? You've learned it. Do you remember? Can you tell me? Or Hajj Kevin? What do you call these 7? Or Khalid, brother
Can't
Khalid?
remember right here, Sheikh.
Okay.
I know though, but I can't remember.
The Ma'ani attributes?
That's correct. Ma'ani attributes. The Ma'ani attributes. These are the Ma'ani attributes by consensus, the 7 of them. Yani, Ahlul Sunnah don't differ that these 7 are Ma'ani attributes. Ma'ani means what you understand from these attributes is more than what you understand from a mere self. It means if you say God, then what you understand from that is God himself. If you say power of God, then, or if you just say power, then you don't understand the self, you understand the attribute. Yani, not you don't understand the self. Actually, you do understand the self when you say power, because there wouldn't be power if there wasn't a self that had it. But you understand something more than the self. That's why they're called ma'ani. Because these attributes, they have a meaning that is more than what is understood by a mere self. It's not merely a self that one understands from these attributes, but something more than that. So ma'ani means meanings. These attributes are meanings. They mean something more than a mere self. And some scholars might call them the real attributes, sifat wujudiyah, real attributes, because means these attributes are not just negating imperfection from Allah. Like when you say hayah, life, that's not merely negating an imperfection of death. Qudra, power, is not merely negating an imperfection of weakness. Knowledge is not merely negating an imperfection of ignorance. Speech is not merely negating an imperfection of muteness. Hearing is not merely negating deafness. Sight is not merely negating blindness. Will is not merely negating compulsion. Rather, all of these, they do negate all the things I just told you, but actually they mean something. Actually, yani, a negation is not something confirmed. A negation is not something confirmed, right? A negation is a denial. These attributes, they are something confirmed. His life is something confirmed. It's not just a negation of death. His power, his knowledge, his speech, his hearing, his sight, his will, those are all confirmed. They're not merely a negation of something. And some scholars say everlastingness goes in this category here. So Abu Hanifa didn't mention everlastingness here. So he said, as for the self attributes, they are life and power and knowledge and speech and hearing and sight and will. So that's so far 11 of the 13 attributes that we've learned. And on top of that, he benefited us by telling us Allah has names. And he benefited us by telling us that Allah has doings. And then he just went back to that and said, وَأَمَّا الْفِعْلِيَّةِ, and as for the doing attributes or the action attributes, فَالتَّخْلِيقُ وَالتَّرْزِيقُ وَالْإِنْشَاءُ وَالْإِبْدَاعُ وَالصُّنْعُ وَغَيْرُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ صِفَاتِ الْفِعْلِ. They are creating. So at-takhliq means al-khalq. Takhliq means khalq. But it's intensified. Yani khalq means creating. Allah has an attribute called khalq, creating. This attribute of khalq, creating, has another name, which is takhliq. So it still means creating, but intensified. So it means a lot of creating or frequent creating. But that's just linguistic take on it. But it's just another name for the same attribute. It's not a different attribute. Takhliq is khalq. And at-tarziq, and providing. Wal-insha, and starting. That means making something happen. Wal-ibda', and so one might say innovating. And then it would mean, if one were to use that word, it would mean making things come into existence after they didn't exist. Without an example, though. Without an example. Ibda' so basically means creating without a previous example, making something exist though this thing didn't have an example to copy it from. And suna', making. وَغَيْرُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ صِفَاتِ الْفِعْلِ, and other than that, meaning other names amongst the attributes of doing. Yani, there's an attribute called doing. And this attribute has many names. Abu Hanifa just gave us some of them, such as suna', making, and ibda', creating without an example. Insha', starting, and making something start. Initiating, that is. Tarziq, providing. This is a particular action, a particular doing. Because when you say doing, that includes all doings. When you say providing, that's a doing, but it's a particular one. All of these refer to the same attribute. And sometimes, because of what you're relating the attribute to, what you are pertaining the attribute to, you're going to adjust the name. So when you're pertaining the attribute to the providing, you're going to call it tarziq. When you're pertaining his doing to providing, you're going to call it tarziq. And when you pertain his doing to life creating, you're going to call it ihya. And when you pertain his doing to making someone die as a believer, you're going to call it is'ad. So it all refers to the same attribute. So when we learn the 13 attributes, we don't learn about the attributes of doing, but we do learn about the attribute of power, and that covers. That covers learning about the attributes of doing when you learn about the attribute of power. But they're not exactly saying the same thing. Like when we say Allah has an attribute called power, and when Abu Hanifa says he has an attribute called doing, they're not really saying the same exact thing there. But when you learn the 13 attributes and you say Allah has power and you don't learn about the attributes of doing, what you will comprehend from this will still be a safe aqidah. Even if you are not saying exactly what Abu Hanifa is saying here, which is going to come inshallah ta'ala. Is there any questions so far? Then Abu Hanifa repeated himself. He said, Lam yazal wa la yazalu bi sifati. He never ceased to be, and he never shall cease to be. He is eternal and everlasting with his attributes. Yani he is attributed with his attributes eternally and everlastingly. Wa asma'uhu sifatun lah, and his names are an attribute of his. That means his names refer to his attributes, except if the name refers to his self. His names refer to his attributes unless they refer to his self, like Allah refers to his self. Whether those names are referring to his attributes of the self or his attributes of actions. So when you learn the 99 names, then you're going to learn them. We did take them. So study them, review them, memorize them, review their meanings. So all this comes out for you. You're going to see there are names that refer to his self, names that refer to his attributes of the self, names that refer to his doings. Lam yahduth lahu sifatun wa lasm. There did not occur for him an attribute. No attribute happened for him or to him. No attribute happened to him. Nor did a name happen to him. Yani, nor did he gain a name. He did not gain an attribute, nor did he gain a name. So, this is a nice mas'ala here that Abu Hanifa is mentioning that yani it's not in many of the books of Aqidah, that the few that I saw. Talking about that the names of Allah, meaning what they refer to, are eternal. Not the words we say. The words we say are created. But what those names refer to is eternal. We already know the attributes are eternal, but not the names, not the words we say. So Abu Hanifa is saying the names are like the attributes. Yani, same judgment. He has names, he has attributes. Yani, he just told you right here. وَأَسْمَاؤُهُ صِفَةٌ لَهُ. His names are an attribute of his. His names are an attribute of his. Treat the names of Allah like you treat the attributes of Allah. Regard the names of Allah like you regard the attributes of Allah. Give them the same judgment. So now so far we still only saw 11 of the 13 attributes, right? Yani, it's actually possible to extract the other two. We could say he has mentioned the 13 attributes by now, but it's going to be by implication. I'm looking for actually the names or the words, not just the implication. What didn't he mention yet anyway? Existence and independence. That's what we're looking for now. Existence and independence. So then he went on to say, Rahimahullah, Lam yazal aliman bi'ilmih. He never ceased to be a knower by his knowledge. وَالْعِلْمُ صِفَتُهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ, and knowledge is his attribute in eternity. So he's a knower eternally by knowledge, because you can't be a knower without knowledge. Yani, being a knower is not valid without knowledge being confirmed. And knowledge is not valid without a knower being confirmed. He is a knower by his knowledge, and the knowledge is his attribute in eternity. قادرا بقدرته والقدرة صفة له في الأزل. Powerful by his power, and power is an attribute of his in eternity. And you know also from our previous Aqidah lessons that this talk is rejection of the Mu'tazila, who denied the attribute, but they confirmed the adjective. They said he is a knower, but without knowledge. He is alive, but not by life. He is a seer, but not by sight. This is atheism. So here Abu Hanifa defies them. He said he's a knower by his knowledge, and his knowledge is an attribute of his in eternity, and powerful by his power, and power is an attribute of his in eternity. وَخَالِقًا بِتَخْلِيقِهِ, and a creator by his creating. وَالتَّخْلِيقُ صِفَةٌ لَهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ, and creating is an attribute of his in eternity. So here, create, khaliq bi takhliqihi, creator by his creating. This is Abu Hanifa's way. This is the Maturidi way. Not the Ash'ari way, meaning the way of the majority of later Ash'aris, which is to say, huwa khaliqun bi qudratihi. He's a creator by his power. So they don't say he's a creator by his power. They say he's powerful by his power, and he's a creator by his creating. But when you teach a new person and you teach them the 13 attributes, and you're not going to talk about the attribute of creating, you're going to talk about the attribute of power. So you're going to teach that new person that he creates by his power. But Abu Hanifa is not saying that, which we say a lot. He's rather saying he's powerful by his power and a creator by his creating. So those mean not the same thing. Those don't mean the same thing to Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. وَالتَّخْلِيقُ صِفَةٌ لَهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ, and creating is an attribute of his in eternity. وَفَاعِلًا بِفِعْلِهِ, and the doer by his doing. وَالْفِعْلُ صِفَةٌ لَهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ, and doing is an attribute of his in eternity, or if you want to translate it as actor. And an actor by his action, and action or acting. An actor by his acting, or an actor by his action. And acting or action is an attribute of his in eternity. But you might not like that word. I do prefer doing. And he's a doer by his doing, and doing is an attribute of his in eternity. وَالْفَاعِلُ هُوَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, and the doer is Allah, exalted is He. وَالْفِعْلُ صِفَتُهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ, and the doing is his attribute in eternity. وَالْمَفْعُولُ مَخْلُوقٌ, and the done is a creation. What was done is a creation. وَفِعْلُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٌ, and the doing of Allah, exalted is He, is not a creation. This sentence here, this is not the way of the majority of the later Ash'aris. They said that فِعْلُ اللَّهِ أَثَرُ قُدْرَتِهِ. They said Allah's doing is a trace of His power. Allah's doing is a trace of His power. So according to that, to say His doing is a trace of His power means the doing is, Allah's doing is created. Abu Hanifa is saying contrary to that. وَفِعْلُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٍ, Allah's doing is not created. وَصِفَاتُهُ فِي الْأَزَلِ غَيْرُ مُحْدَثَةٍ, and His attributes in eternity are not eventual, are not occurring or happening. وَلَا مَخْلُوقَةٌ, nor are they created. So here, his attributes are not created. This is another statement that we could extract from it that he doesn't need anything. But Yani, I'm just looking for more explicit, not extraction, not implication. فَمَنْ قَالَ إِنَّهَا مَخْلُوقَةٌ أَوْ مُحْدَثَةٌ. So whoever said they are created, his attributes are created, or that his attributes are occurring or eventual, أَوْ وَقَفَ, or he was neutral about whether they were or weren't, أَوْ شَكَّ فِيهَا, or he doubted about them being created or not. So neutral means he's not taking a position whether it's created or not. He's a kafir. Doubting means he doesn't know if they're created or not. So he's kafir too. Abu Hanifa said, فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ بِاللَّهِ. Then this neutral one, or this doubtful one, or this one who actually confirms that his attributes are created, he's a disbeliever in God. وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي الْمَصَاحِفِ مَكْتُوبٌ. And the Quran is the speech of Allah Ta'ala. Okay. This statement has very delicate explanation. It is important to understand it well. And I actually meant to produce a document for what I'm going to say to you now, but I didn't produce it. So maybe I will later, especially if someone thinks that what I'm about to say is a mistake. But what I'm going to say right now is not a mistake. Bi-ithnillahi ta'ala. So what he said here, he said, وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي الْمَصَاحِفِ مَكْتُوبٌ. And the Quran, and you know, this word Quran has two meanings. Sometimes refers to Allah's attribute of speech. Sometimes it refers to the revealed words. But the first meaning in religion for Quran is Allah's attribute of speech. So that's why Abu Hanifa said, وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. The Quran is the speech of Allah, exalted is He. So up till there, he started by telling us the first meaning of the Quran. وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. The Quran, it is the speech of Allah Ta'ala. That is its first meaning in the religion. And the revealed words is not its first meaning in the religion, even if that's what you're accustomed to. Especially since now you live 1400 years after the Prophet ﷺ. But the old ones, they understood what I'm telling you. They didn't just understand from the word Quran, the book. They understood from Al-Quran that it is the speech of Allah. Yani, the word itself refers to his attribute, not the book. It does refer to the book too, but it actually refers to sometimes not the book, but his eternal attribute. So he says, وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. The Quran is the speech of Allah, exalted is He. It's His eternal attribute. Now, what did he say right here? فِي الْمَصَاحِفِ مَكْتُوبٌ. It is His attribute, His eternal attribute, in the Mus'hafs written. So, someone might say, no, that doesn't mean that His attribute is written in the Mus'haf. The attribute can't be written. That's true, the attribute can't be itself written. But this word maktub here, it refers to the attribute. Maktub means written. That word refers to the attribute. So someone might say, you're saying the attribute is written? And so that means like what we already were saying about the name. He has name in eternity, has attributes. I said he has name doesn't mean the word. We say rather what it refers to. So his attribute is written. Yeah, it doesn't mean the attribute itself is written. Means what refers to the attribute is written. What refers to the attribute is written. Yani, what is written refers to the attribute. The maktub refers to the attribute. That's the meaning here. وَفِي الْقُلُوبِ مَحْفُوظ, and in the hearts memorized, means what's memorized in the hearts refers to the attribute. He's saying the attribute is mahfuz and the attribute is maktub. It doesn't mean the attribute itself, means what refers to it. And I'm going to show you why it means like that. It's right here in the text. وَعَلَى الْأَلْسُنِ مَقْرُوء, and on the tongues recited. So, same thing. It means what is recited refers to the attribute. وَعَلَى النَّبِيِّ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ munazzal, and upon the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, it is revealed. وَلَفْظُنَا بِالْقُرْآنِ مَخْلُوقٌ, and our pronunciation of the Quran, our pronunciation of the revealed expressions, it is created. Okay, now what did he say right here? وَكِتَابَتُنَا لَهُ مَخْلُوقًا, and our kitaba, our writing of the Quran, it is created. So here, maktub means written. Kitaba means writing, the writing itself. The writing is the kitaba. The maktub is what's written. So for this, someone might maybe explain it in a way, and maybe some of them explained it that way, to say maktub here refers to what's created. Maktub here refers to what's not created. But kitaba here refers to what is created. He said, وَكِتَابَتُنَا لَهُ مَخْلُوقًا, our writing of it is created. But the maktub, what's written, means what the writing refers to. What the writing refers to is not created. So if that's confusing for you, then you can refer it back to dhikr. Dhikr. You say, for example, Allah is madhkur. Madhkur has same pattern as maktub. Madhkur means mentioned. So you have the dhakir, the mentioner. That's going to be you. You're the mentioner. The dhakir. You have the dhikr. The dhikr is what you say. That's your created expressions. And you have the madhkur, the mentioned. The mentioned, that's the mentioned here. The madhkur is not created. When Allah is the madhkur, then we're going to say the madhkur is not created. When Allah is the mentioned, then the mentioned is not created. And when we say the mentioned is not created, we're not talking about the mentioning. We're not talking about the actual words that you're mentioning. We're talking about what those words refer to. So this statement of Abu Hanifa is very delicate. And Al-Tahawi's statement even more delicate than this one. So what did he say? He said, وَكِتَابَتُنَا لَهُ مَخْلُوقًا, our writing, what we script that refers to the Quran, which is the attribute of Allah, it is created, and we call it the Quran, that writing. وَقِرَاءَتُنَا لَهُ مَخْلُوقًا, and our qira'ah. So have here the maqru'. So someone might explain these words to mean the maqru' is the qira'ah. That's not what he means. Like someone might explain here the maktub as the kitaba. The maktub here doesn't refer to the kitaba. The maktub is not created. The maqru' is not created. Meaning what it refers to is not created. And the actual qira'ah, which is what we do, our recitation, our recital, وَقِرَاءَتُنَا لَهُ مَخْلُوقًا, and our recital of it is creation. وَالْقُرْآنُ غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٍ, and the Quran itself is not created. So here, let me just finish out this topic here. وَمَا ذَكَرَهُ اللَّهُ فِي الْقُرْآنِ حِكَايَةً عَنْ مُوسَى وَغَيْرِهِ مِنَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ, and what Allah mentioned in the Quran, citing Moses and others amongst the prophets, and Pharaoh and Satan. فإن ذلك كله كلام الله تعالى إخبارا عنهم. Indeed, all of that is the speech of God informing about them. Indeed, all of that is the speech of God telling about them. وكلام الله تعالى غير مخلوق. And the speech of Allah, exalted is He, is not created. So you see his repetition. Now, I don't remember seeing repetition like this except from Shaykh Abdullah in As-Sirat al-Mustaqim. And in some other books too, he has some repetition, but As-Sirat al-Mustaqim has a lot of repetition like here. وكلام موسى وغيره من المخلوقين مخلوق. And the speech of Moses and others amongst the created beings is created. وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فَهُوَ قَدِيمٌ. And then he repeated himself again, but he did switch the words up a little bit because he said, and the Quran is the speech of Allah, exalted is He, and so it is eternal. So saying فَهُوَ قَدِيمٌ is like saying غَيْرُ مَخْلُوق. It's not created, it's eternal. So that's more repetition. لَا كَلَامُهُمْ. It's not their speech that's eternal. وَسَمِعَ مُوسَى كَلَامَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. And Moses heard the speech of God. Exalted is He. قَالَ تَعَالَى. Said the exalted. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. Allah spoke a speech to Moses. Allah spoke to Moses a speech, or a speaking. Allah spoke a speaking to Moses. Just trying to translate it literally for you so you can get a feel for what it is saying. Saying he spoke a speech or he spoke a speaking. That's to emphasize that it's literal. He literally, as if it says, God literally spoke to Moses. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. وَقَدْ كَانَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى مُتَكَلِّمًا. And Allah Ta'ala was, in eternity, a speaker. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ كَلَّمَ مُوسَى. He was a speaker in eternity and he was not speaking to Moses in eternity. He spoke to Moses when Moses was created. And he didn't change. Because the meaning is that he enabled Moses to hear the uncreated, unchanging speech. So that was his speaking to Moses. And Moses understood whatever Allah created in him to understand. So that's how he spoke to, that's his speaking to Moses. How here means that's what happened to Moses. Because Moses is the creation here. And all of what happened to him is the creation. How is said about the creation. وَقَدْ كَانَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى خَالِقًا فِي الْأَزَلِ. And Allah was creator in eternity. Exalted is He. وَلَمْ يَخْلُقِ الْخَلْقِ. And He didn't create the creation. He was creator in eternity. And creation is not eternal. So it means that He's creator in eternity because He has an attribute of creating in eternity. And the creation itself is created, an event. And and so in the same way you say, He was a speaker in eternity. So He had a speech in eternity. And the one who was spoken to, the creature who was spoken to is not eternal. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Nothing is whatsoever like Him, and He is the hearer, the seer. Wait, so I can't get as far as I want. I'll have to stop here. So, as far as clear expressions, not implication or hint, I counted 11 attributes. Maybe I missed something there. Maybe there's something that flew past me. Wallahu alam. Do you have any question?
Sorry.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Let me understand. You said that creation is a trace of Allah's power.
according to most of the later Ash'aris.
There. But what, I don't know, you said that somebody said that was blasphemy?
No, that's not blasphemy.
So what was said? So I must have misunderstood.
Okay. So some said the creation, yani. Of course, they were using Arabic words though. The fi'l, the doing. Let's use the word doing here. Some said the doing of Allah is a trace of His power. So maybe that makes your own question clearer. Instead of the word creation, put the word doing here. It doesn't, yeah, just put the word doing. So they said the doing of Allah is a trace of His power. So that's not blasphemy. That statement has a meaning. That statement can be explained in a way that's not even deviant. It's just that it won't be the way the Maturidis use the same words. When they use the word, they mean something else. So if you say the doing of Allah is a trace of His power, then that means the doing of Allah is created. Abu Hanifa said the doing of Allah is not created. Now, so yeah, someone might say, so how there's no blasphemy here? They're saying two opposite things concerning what's created. That is, concerning what's eternal. What's eternal and what's not eternal. Looks like one of them saying that what one of them says is an eternal attribute of Allah is actually something created. How's there's no blasphemy here? Because really, yeah, they're using the same word, but they're defining it differently.
That's what I was getting mixed up at. That right there. You said that the word doing.
Yeah.
That is the power of Allah, right?
No. So let's look into two sides. We have the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Abu Hanifa is saying what the Maturidis say, because they took from him. He's saying, Allah is a doer in eternity with an eternal doing. So the doing is an attribute in eternity, and the done thing is a creation. That's clear. So what he means is he's a doer, literally is a doer. Doer means creator. And with a doing, because you can't be a doer without a doing. So if he is a doer, then he must have a doing, or else it's not valid to call him a doer. And if he's an eternal doer, then it must mean that he has an eternal doing. Now, where someone might find issue here is going to say, so what you're saying, he had an eternal creation then? The creation's eternal since he has an eternal, he has a doing in eternity? So the answer is no. The creation is not eternal because he has a doing in eternity. The doing in eternity is his attribute. Yani, what we're saying is he has an attribute. He has an attribute in eternity. This, like other attributes, Yani. Doesn't he have an attribute called power in eternity and knowledge in eternity? So he has an attribute called creating in eternity, an eternal an eternal attribute. And the doing, the done thing is a creation, not eternal. So I think that's clear. So the other ones are saying, well, we're not going to say he has doing in eternity because sounds like you're saying the creation is eternal. We don't want to say creation is eternal. That's wrong. So no, we're going to say, instead of saying he's a doer in eternity with a doing in eternity and the done thing is created, we're going to say he was powerful in eternity. He was powerful in eternity by eternal power. Power to do something, which is creating. He has the power to do something. So his doing is what he did. That's what they're saying. They're saying so he has power and his doing is a trace of that power. So his doing is a creation.
I got it. I got it. That right there. I got it. I got it. I was making sure. Who you said that again?
That last one is the saying of the majority of later Ash'aris. You said the attribute of doing, according to the Maturidis, while the other ones are saying the doing is done. Exactly. Which is created. Yes. Which is a trace of his power attribute. Correct. Yes. You have a question regarding the saying of Abu Hanifa. Yes. في المصاحف مكتوب. Yes. يعني في المصاحف كتابة. هذه الكتابة تدل على شيء. هذا الشيء يقال له مكتوب. Yes. Like for example, Allah says about Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam that the Jews and the Christians found him maktub in their book. Muhammad is maktub in their books. So what does maktub mean here? Maktub here does not mean the writing. Maktub here doesn't mean Muhammad, he is the maktub. Muhammad is maktub in their book. So maktub means written. Muhammad is written in their books. It means there's writing in there that refers to Muhammad. Muhammad is the maktub. The kitab is something else. So that's clear for you? Did you ask what you want? You said, may it be explained in another way? I heard it explained in another way. Go ahead. Like, inshallah, next week, if Allah enables me, I'll produce for you documentation of Az-Zarkashi, where he's clarifying like what I'm saying to you. معناه أن كلام الله ليس من تأليف بشر أو ملك. In this case, in these lines, I don't know that this meaning goes there. Because these statements that we're talking about now, they contain istikhdam. Istikhdam, when you mention a word, when you come upon a word, it has a meaning. And then you keep going deeper into the sentence. And then in the sentence, you come across a pronoun. This pronoun goes back to that word, but with a new meaning. So these statements of Abu Hanifa, they have double meaning in them. They have istikhdam in them. And also the others who said like this. There's istikhdam in the statement. There's some double meaning in the statement. So if you're not knowledgeable, then you're not going to understand. There's a good chance you will understand what he's saying. And even if you are knowledgeable, this issue, you could just slip there. Or you might explain it in another way. And I heard it explained in another way, but it's not the way Az-Zarkashi said. What I'm saying to you is what Az-Zarkashi said. Okay, barakallahu feekum. Yeah, if he's not accustomed to this issue, then he won't see how they're going back and forth the way they are. How they are using a double meaning. There's a wordplay at hand here. Wordplay. And Tahawi's statement is even more delicate. I mean, you too. Is Qada from Ramadan considered obligatory fasting? Yes. Meaning, does a woman have to ask her husband for permission to fast now? No, she does not. طيب, if there's no other question, then we'll log out here. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.